Welcome back to Rise and Rouse, a podcast for those who give a damn. This is your host, Erin Allgood, social impact strategist, consultant, and lover of liberation. On today's episode, you'll hear from Emerald Anderson Ford. We do a deep dive into Juneteenth, what the holiday means, the history behind it, and some really important takeaways for white folks. Before we dive in, though, I have a couple of announcements and reminders that I want to share. First, you met Emerald Anderson Ford previously on season 1 of Rise and Rouse. And I shared on our last episode that Emerald and I have teamed up to create a new venture called the Liberation Nexus Lab. That is a home for our consulting work, as well as our online community where we've been hosting community conversations, book clubs, and more. If you're interested, go take a look at our new website, liberationnexuslab.com, and sign up for our newsletter to learn more about all of our upcoming offers. We have an upcoming event on allyship for Pride Month on June 26th in the evening. Head on over to our website to learn a little bit more about that. You'll notice that I've migrated everything over to Substack. That's so you'll be able to access blog posts as well as all of our past and upcoming podcast episodes. We've removed the paywall at this point, so all episodes should be full length and fully available to you. I do encourage you to become a paying subscriber at $8 a month, though, because it helps me to subsidize the cost of producing this podcast and keeps it sustainable for years to come. I appreciate your support no matter how you show it, whether that's through liking and subscribing, or sharing my podcast episodes with all of your friends and family, or signing up for my newsletter at allgoodstrategies.com. Thank you all so much for your support. I truly, truly appreciate it. I am so excited because today I have Emerald Anderson Ford, who is my dear friend, colleague, business partner in the Liberation Nexus Lab. And today's episode is so special because we're going to be talking about, this is a joint production of the Liberation Nexus Lab and Rise and Rouse. And you'll just get this benefit of being able to hear Emerald and I talk about some really big topics and just kind of be that fly on the wall between the conversation back and forth. We're really excited to be here. So Emerald, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit just because it's been it's been a season since you were last on. And then we'll talk a little bit about the lab too.
Awesome. Well, hello. I'm so excited to be back here. It's weird because I know you and I talk to you every day, and somehow this still feels like super formal. And I'm like, I don't know how to behave with Erin right now, even though I talk to her every day. So my name is Emerald Anderson Ford. For those of you who don't know, although I think a lot of you might be aware of that, I am a lot of things here in Manchester, New Hampshire, not the least of which is Erin's business partner and collaborator and accomplice in the work of justice and abolition and liberation for all of us with Liberation Nexus Lab. I am a DEI practitioner by business trade, I suppose, although I have stepped outside of nonprofit industrial complex, the business world, and have just really started to think about what is this grassroots effort towards liberation and community building. And so what we have been describing ourselves as, which I really love, those of y'all who haven't checked out our website or seen our new bios, but we have these little taglines about who we are. So mine is that I am a traveling philosopher and alchemist, writer, and abolitionist. And I think those things are like me to a T almost. So that's me. And I'm really excited to be here again and just to have an honest conversation with Erin about Juneteenth, but also this overarching ideation of liberation, how each cohort of people, each grouping of people, race, ethnicity, whatever, in their own quest for liberation is automatically now adding to everybody's quest for liberation. I'm like, what does that mean collectively? So thanks for having me here to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we'll be having this conversation, right before Juneteenth, and then smack dab in the middle of Pride Month, smack dab also in the middle of the genocide against Palestinians. Mm-hmm. And so we'll be talking about all of those things, which I'm not excited that we're talking about all of those things, but I'm happy that folks are going to get the insight that we're going to be sharing and kind of the processing that we do together too.
Right. And recognizing how how having that recognition is foundational in order for there to be collective freedom in all of us. That has to be the foundation of what we're doing, is recognizing all of our humanity is bound up together. That's the idea of Ubuntu, is that we are all tied. I am a human because you are a human. What happens to you is happening to me. It may not be happening the same way, but it's all bound together. And if we could just get people to get that down, I feel like we would be way better off than we currently.
Yeah. 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 So yeah, let's talk about the lab, and then we'll dive into talking about Juneteenth. So the Liberation Nexus Lab, you've all had a little bit of a preview of what that's all about, and Emerald and I talk about it. We have a post up on Substack where we talk at length about the lab and what it means to us. So we'll link to that in the show notes so you can find that. But it really, the way that the lab started is that Emerald and I have worked together for 4 years now, 4+ years. Have loved working together. And then as we were starting to just think about, like, how could we formalize our work together more? How could we do more in partnership? We also came across this idea of, like, we don't just want to do DEI consulting anymore. Like, DEI consulting has just become the Band-Aid on the gaping wound that is racism and oppression in America, across the world, and all of that. And so we realized that we needed to go beyond just kind of working within institutions and actually start to connect people in community, because that's where all of the good stuff happens. Mm-hmm. And so that was, so we created the lab as this space for authentic, radical allyship and community building and collaboration. There's so many cool things that are part of that, but without, you can go to the website to learn a little bit more about it. But it's really intended to be this place where we are helping everybody understand how to get free.
Yeah. That's right. I have my phone in my hand because there's this quote I have been sitting with for like the past 3 days. And for those of y'all who don't know me, this is like a very Emerald thing, to like get a piece of something and then just sit with that for like a week and a half. You would be like, why? But like, this is who I am as a human being. But I've been sitting with this quote, this Bell Hooks quote, and I wanted to pull it up because I could have paraphrased it, but I want to say the actual quote. It says, "Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion." And so, like, I've been sitting with that quote for about a week now. If you haven't read Bell Hooks, read anything by Bell Hooks. But this idea that freedom and liberation can't be done alone. It rarely is done alone, right? Bell Hooks says that it is an act of communion. In order for us to get free, in order for us to get liberated, in order for us to have true justice with one another and in the world, in order for there to be equity and understanding and care, it is in community and in communion. It is an act of building community with one another. And I just think that that's the foundation of it all. And I think that that's what Aaron and I are trying to do with the lab. We're trying to just show that in order to survive the systems that have been created around us, that we continuously have to play into, that feel like they dictate every action that we're able to take, every decision we're able to make. In order for us to survive these systems, we have to be doing it together. And what the systems are doing is continuously keeping us separated, siloed, isolated, right? Like, it really is continuing to pull us apart. Our time is completely taken over by work, by productivity, by production. Our ability to like have third spaces where we can sit in community is again taken over by the need to spend money. Like, there aren't free spaces in a lot of ways. And so there's like all of these barriers that we have to actually just sitting down and breaking bread with people. Then there's fear, right? So there's a culture war. So it's even if you have the space, even if you have a home that can entertain and 5 people on your neighborhood street or whatever, your neighborhood, on your block, the culture war is telling us that you shouldn't be doing that it's dangerous to have other people over, to be in community with other people. You don't know what they got going on. And I think, Aaron, I just reject that. Yes, obviously you want to have some discernment and you want to have caution for your psychological, physical, emotional well-being, obviously. And I think that we've dovetailed into just not wanting to be connected with other people. There's something so strange about what's happening in our larger zeitgeist that I can't quite put my finger on. But I think Aaron and I recognize that, no, sometimes we just got to sit down and be in a book club together. Sometimes we need to sit down and have a meal together. Sometimes we need to sit down and look at a bell hooks quote and let's talk about that quote for an hour. But let's just gain perspective and let's find ways to invite people in to know that they're going to be safe in gaining that perspective and sharing their own individual and unique perspective, and that we're going to wrestle with it. Because at the end of the day, that's all we can do. All we can do is say, I think I feel this way. There's another perspective that's being presented that feels in opposition to what I think I feel. And all we can do is sit there and try to understand each of those points and then move in a way that honors both of those points. Like that's all we can do at any given moment in time. And I think that that's what the lab is about at the end of the day. I don't know, Aaron, what would you say?
Yeah, I think that we're trying to move people along. There's a visual that we use that is like, we're all smack dab in the comfort zone. We need to move through the fear into the growth zone. And I think we help people feel really safe. As we had a conversation yesterday with a new client, and they were just saying how excited they are and how safe they felt. Just even in the first meeting with us, in the first conversation, which is why they ended up choosing to work with us. A lot of the spaces that people are kind of stepping into in this kind of work to do this kind of learning, people aren't tending always to that kind of space and to that kind of creating of the conditions. Yeah. And you and I just like do that by virtue of just being the two of us.
There's authenticity that we bring to it. One, that as again, we were talking yesterday, when you show up authentically, it gives other people the permission to show up authentically, right? And so I think that by sheer nature of us saying we're going to show up as exactly who we are makes the space feel safer already, because you have these two folks, and 9 times out of 10, we're facilitating, we're leading, we're talking. So you have these folks who are at the front of the room showing up in all of their mistakes and all of their expertise and all of their whimsy and all of the things that they take seriously. Like all of it is showing up, and we're saying that it's okay for you to do the same. So I think that in and of itself is safety. And to that end, though, think about how you and I have to know who we are as individuals to be able to say that, to be able to have the ability to self-reflect and in a moment say, so here's the thing that I actually have an issue with. Here's where I struggle. So now I'm going to share this struggle with you all to let you know that, like, it's not just you. I think you and I possess a really unique ability to be able to do that and to be able to say, I completely disagree with everything you're saying. I think that you are wrong. I think it is dehumanizing, A, B, C, D, E, F through Z. And that's yours to figure out. And I'm not going to have nothing to do with you. But that's yours to figure out. And you are a human being who got some shit to figure out, just like I am. Like, I can do that. I can hold that without being overly angry. Although, let's be clear again, I am overly angry. Yeah. One white supremacist in this country. But I think the point still stands, right? And everybody can't do that in the moment, nor should everybody have to do that in the moment. But it is a skill set that I think you and I have picked up that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think that, like, between the two of us, this is like what was just running through my head, is that, like, we could hand somebody their ass, but they would still want to be in relationship.
They would still want to be in the room. I completely agree.
Yeah. And that's like, and that is something special that, like, not everybody can walk that line. And I'm just grateful I get to do it with you.
It's fun. I think it's fun. So I know today we're supposed to be talking about Juneteenth and liberation. I am going to leave now, y'all. I told Aaron, listen,
do it.
I was like, as the resident Black lady, I'm going to kick us off to the Juneteenth convo. And so I don't want to make assumptions about what folks listening know or do not know. So I'm just going to give like a couple seconds over like what the holiday is, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more philosophically about what this all means. So Juneteenth is, African-American, Black American Independence Day, Freedom Day, Emancipation Day. And so it is typically celebrated on June 19th each year. And it has been since, I can tell you the original Juneteenth, but I don't know. It's officially become a holiday at different points in time for different states.
Yeah.
So I don't have all of that information. But essentially, sometime in the teens of June in 1865, the last of enslaved folks found out that they had been emancipated from American chattel slavery via the Emancipation Proclamation that President Abraham Lincoln put out. Mind you, in the teens of June, 1865, but the Emancipation Proclamation went out January 1st, 1863. So we're talking 2 years, an entire 2 years that these folks in Texas and across the country, it just took that long for the word to get to where it needed to be for everybody to hear it. So it was in June of 1865 when the last of those who were enslaved found out about it. And that then became the cruxus of Juneteenth, because we can't pin down a specific date in that time frame. Celebrate on June 19th. Juneteenth is what we call it. And I think part of the thing that I kind of want to talk about is that it took 2 years for it to get to everybody. We're talking about in the 1800s and late 1800s. So we did not have social media. Things were not going across the world very quickly. So there was going to be a little bit of a time lapse for sure. And 2.5 years is a bit excessive. And it makes you have to stop and wonder, how many of these white folks in this country at that time was just not spreading the news to the people who need it.
Right.
Yep. That's something that every time Juneteenth rolls around, I kind of shake my head at. I'm 2 years for everybody to get the word sounds really excessive to me.
Yeah. But it also just tracks with everything else that we know about how racism operates.
That's a word. It just tracks, doesn't it?
Yep. Nowadays, it is celebrated. It is I think it became a federal holiday 2 years ago.
I think so. Yeah. 2021, 2022, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is that because it's a federal holiday now, a lot of the organizations we work with, people we know, have the day off.
Mm-hmm.
And I also recognize that people have no idea how to quote unquote celebrate it.
Do you know what I mean?
It.
That is so interesting. I have had so many white folk be like, so what should I be doing on Juneteenth? And my response is always educating yourself or advocating for Black folk in particular on Juneteenth in this country. And that can be maybe a bunch of nice white ladies bring over some food to a Black family and then go on and have a conversation with themselves about activism as nice white ladies in their community. That might mean, doing some protesting, some demonstrating outside of somebody's office or a state house as white folks who want to be in allyship and accomplice with Black folks about things like our carceral system that disproportionately impacts Black Americans, which just puts us right back into a system of enslavement. That is how white folks need to be celebrated. Let us do the cookouts. Let us have the dances. Let us have the drinks on the side and the spades games and playing Uno and the fun. And y'all do some work on yourselves and on your community with regards to how it is reflective of the Black community. That's how white folks celebrate, in my opinion. I don't know, Aaron. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I agree with you as well, too, because I think that because I see other folks treating it just kind of like another holiday, just okay, this is my day off and I'm going to go do something. And it's we actually, as white folks, have a responsibility to go and learn about the history of Juneteenth and educate ourselves about that and about all of the different historical things that happened during that time. You and I read a book that was really, really, really good at documenting all the history, and I can't remember what it's called now.
Are you talking about, was it White Rage?
White Rage, yeah. Thank you. Completely was gone out of my head. I could not for the life of me think.
Carol Anderson,
Carol Anderson, White Rage, which I think was an intense book to read.
It was hard. It's hard.
It was hard. It was very dense, but a really comprehensive overview of the history, starting from 1619 on. So I would recommend a book that. There's all sorts of other books that we could recommend as well, but there's this element of, when we talk about this work too, is that there's the head, heart, and hands. So there's the head part of things. We are, especially as white folks, we tend to just want to educate ourselves and just absorb information. And I'll be honest, like passively absorb information. So just kind of like, just reading a book, listening to this podcast, listening to, an audiobook or something like that, watching a documentary. That's important work that has to be done.
Yeah.
But like it can't be done without doing the deep internal work around understanding like how anti-Blackness has shaped us as white folks and how it continues to play a role in our lives, in our daily lives too. So because, that is like one of the things that I continue to do is to sit there and like interrogate my own kind of like anti-Blackness, my own, because again, like we're raised in the sauce, like raised in this culture, in this fishbowl of racism. And so in what ways am I replicating those systems of oppression in my own life?
Yeah.
Where am I worried about like giving up privilege, things like that. And so getting super honest with myself and figuring out then the hands part of things is like, what's the actions that I can be taking?
So where do you see that for yourself then? Like, I'm interested, right? Like, I feel like, where do you see that stuff showing up for you? Because I know, like, for me, if I were to sit here, I don't even have to sit here for that long to name where like I hold anti-Black sentiment as a Black woman, right? And so I've talked a lot about, it took me some years. I was a recruiter for an organization for some time. And when Black students like in college would come up to me and express interest, I would like coach them on how their hair should be, how they should dress, and all these things, right? And it took me so long to like pull that apart. Why was I imposing these professionalism standards that are rooted in anti-Blackness as well as anti a lot of other things, right? But why was I doing that? And I could like sit and name that. And there are even moments now. I had a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago because I was basically saying like, I don't really like kids. I don't really like other people's kids. Like I have 2 kids, but I don't really like kids, right? And I am acutely aware of that. But then we're saying how like being anti-child, being anti-kids is anti-revolutionary. All of the kids are our kids, and we have to be caring for all of the kids. And so I think the person said back to me, you can have a child-free life. You can't have a child-free planet. You can't have a child-free existence. You can have a child-free home. That's the only thing you are guaranteed to have a right to is your right to say, I don't want to have children. I want a child-free home. But we don't get to impose this like, we don't want to see kids out in public. No, that's actually that's anti-liberation work, right? But like, so like those are things for me that like come up and I'm like, oh, I need to like sit with that. That's also anti-Black in a lot of ways. Like I have to think about these things. So I'm just wondering, I guess I'm asking you to be vulnerable and share with the class. What is something that like you've had to work on as a white person when you think about anti-Blackness in your life?
I mean, the professionalism piece is something for sure. I'll just latch onto that because that's and ramble about that for a few minutes as the rest of my brain catches up. But like, I had to like, I mean, even still like today, like one of the things I wrestled with, like you and I just were talking about this, like, do we put all of our credentials on the website? Like I have it on my All Good Strategies website, like all like the laundry list of credentials and so on and so forth. And you're like, this is really like the vibe we're putting out there. And I'm like, you're right. I'm like, this is classist, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like it is super classist to like go put a laundry list of credentials, you know what I mean? To just be like, it's not the vibe that we're trying to put out there. And it is like a trap I fall into a lot of times where I am just like, I want to like trot out all those degrees, whatever, like, because it like creates legitimacy and it like in my expertise and things like that. And I had somebody ask me yesterday, even in a conversation, they were like, so what's your background? Like what makes you qualified to do this work? And I was like, oh, and it wasn't in particular this work that we're talking about, like, but a different type of project that I'm working on right now. And I just remember feeling like, oh, that's right. Like, unless I like am wearing some of that shit on my sleeve, I am not afforded that same kind of like that assumption that I am qualified to be doing what I'm doing. And there's some like internalized things around that we could talk about too. But I have recognized in my own self that there are times where I'm in spaces and I am falling back onto that internalized, like you have to have a degree in order to do this work, in order to be legitimate, in order to do those kinds of things. And I mean, like when I was like at my most asshole, I would say that there were probably times where I was just like, but I remember this from my like training in DEIJ stuff. And so I'm going to now like question this Black person's lived experience or whatever. And like, and so there's times that I have done things like that. And I've had to go back into my own self and be like, oh, fuck are you doing, Aaron? Like, who are you to say to do that? And those are like, that stuff happens automatically in my mind. Yeah. And part of the work is like, is recognizing it when it happens and then challenging the narrative that my brain automatically defaulted to. Yeah. And then journaling about it, working through it, having a conversation with somebody about like, this is really shitty that this is where I defaulted to. And I'm ashamed of it, but I'm also using it as a learning opportunity.
And that's it, right? Like,
exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. And don't make a spectacle when you do forget.
That's right.
That's right. There's like, because that is the other part of those things too, is like then it centers like the person who made the mistake.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do this. I would never. Now, not everybody's worried about your damn feelings.
Exactly. Right. When and you're not the one who's been harmed in that moment.
Right.
You know, and that happens so frequently too. And just, I mean, I'll even say like when you and I first started working together, I was definitely really careful about how I showed up in those spaces because I didn't want you to think that I was just like another white woman who was like stepping into the space and who had bad intentions or anything like that. And so I was really, really careful about how I really started the relationship. Yeah, I know. I know. Right. Yeah. If I had fucked up, you wouldn't be here.
Well,
you know, but I'll just say about that, one of the things I have learned, and this can be hopefully helpful for other white folks listening, but is being very intentional about the space you're taking up or the space you're not taking up in conversations and spaces. I have been very intentional about how I show up in spaces because I do not want to dominate them. I don't talk over people. Like that is one of the biggest things that I think when we talk about like anti-oppression, like don't fucking talk over people, like as a baseline. And there are a lot of people who feel that they need to get heard because like being heard is very, very important. And it actually is like not in those spaces being like puffing your chest up and having to be heard and talking over people is not the flex that people think it is.
I would agree with you on that. And I think something that, again, for listeners who just occupy whatever the dominant identity is, right? Because we started with Juneteenth, but like you said, it's Pride Month. That's true for like, you and I had this conversation too, just the other day. We were talking about how in this grand scheme of liberation, as two women who are cisgendered women and who identify as queer, as bisexual, pansexual, and who are both married to cisgendered men, we were saying how like it feels strange sometimes because it doesn't feel like we are a part of the queer community in a lot of ways, or like we would be accepted or like welcome. And I think that's on a larger scale. I don't think that reigns true in the one-to-ones that we have with our like actual personal friends, but on a larger scale. And so we're just talking about that. And just to your point of like, well, like at the end of the day, I think we both know, but we can't make it about us because we do identify that way and nobody can stop us from that. Is who we are as people. And also because of our cisgenderedness, because of our heterosexual relationships, heteronormative relationships, and our partners are cisgendered, we are not in any danger or risk when it comes to our sexuality. And so we can have that conversation with one another. We can try to figure out like what that means, how we show up in space as members of a community, but also as allies and accomplices, and to ensure that platforms are for those who are actually seeing the violence of it, because we are not experiencing violence because of that, whereas other people legitimately are, right? And I think it's the same thing. We can recognize this feels hard for us in some ways, and still, I'm not going to make it about me right now because I recognize that it is differently and maybe more significantly harder for other people in other ways. I think that happens. I can speak for myself, I think, here in the queer community. I think that happens a lot with race and ethnicity. It's like, white ladies, y'all got shit. There is misogyny. Like, that's true. And then when we're having a conversation, though, about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, misogyny exists. But right now, we are actually talking about the intensity of racialized misogyny. And I need for y'all to understand that you can have your feelings and start to figure out what that looks like over here without taking over the conversation about those who may be experiencing that intersection or a different type of violent oppression in certain ways, right? And I think that becomes really hard for people when you add race in it. For some reason, we can get it when it comes to like gender. Well, no, never mind. Let me eat those words right on back. But we can't get it across the board, and we surely cannot get it when it comes to race.
Yeah. And, you've got things like the Divisive Concepts Bill here in New Hampshire, which thankfully got struck down just a few weeks ago.
It'll be, let's be honest.
Of course it will be. Yeah, it will be. And and in some of the work that I'm doing, like, I'm talking to people and they're just like, that Divisive Concepts Bill has generated so much fear for people doing really important work out in the world. And so they are just really afraid about whatever they can say if they're going in and doing education within schools on whatever topic it might be. But they are like already self-censoring because of that. So everything essentially, I think, because we're swimming in the sauce, because we see these things like Divisive Concepts Bills, because we see backlash in some way or another, we then censor ourselves. We then kind of like package it all up into a box and just put the box over here and we'll only open it up. Like, when we realize that like our own oppression is tied to everybody else's own oppression and that we have to open that fucking box and look at it and engage with all of that in order for us to be able to get free.
It really is this idea of like, I care about how other people feel around me. I genuinely care how I make others feel, how they feel when they are in my presence. So yes, I am always trying to be authentic and show up as myself and not care about trivial and frivolous standards of how or what it means to like be human, to exist, to perform my identities, right? I don't care about that stuff.
Right.
So when I say I don't care about what people think, that's what I mean. I don't care about those trivialized standards, right? But I care very deeply about if somebody feels safe, if I've hurt somebody, if I have offended somebody. I want to understand. I want to correct it. I want to add perspective if maybe they don't understand I care very, very, very deeply about those. And I feel like not everybody does. And that is so strange to me. Like, that is one of the strangest things, one of the strangest phenomena that I've seen in my 40 years at this point, right? Is people really walk around here like, I do not care that this group of people feels unsafe around me. Yeah. That is a very strange thing to me.
Yeah. It's wild. Or even worse, like they get off on it.
Wow. They love that people
they love it.
Safe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to like othering and belonging and domination, you know what I mean? And things like that. And people, and fucking people are like products of like the environments that they're growing up in, the culture that they're swimming in, and then like their own kind of desire or lack of desire to engage with the world, you know, in those kinds of ways. And there's something that makes them want to go out and be dominant, to be supremacist over others.
I don't know that I fully receive that. I don't know that it's wrong. I don't think that it's wrong. But there's something about that feels like it's like when people say that hate and racism is a mental illness, and I'm like, don't do that to me because I have mental illness. So like, don't lump us in. So when I think about like trauma, I'm like, I don't want to be like, oh, y'all have all of this harm in your background. Like, hate can exist on its own, no?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to give it a pass, but I do think that there's
some unhealed shit
unhealed shit. Yeah. And also there is some just kind of built in like sadism. Do you know what I mean? That like that kind of that again, that people get off on showing up in that way in society. And
It's like examine your stuff. Examine why it is.
Exactly.
We don't know what the underlying reason is, but it's not necessarily like, again, like there was harm or anything, but it's just you can feel bad for people who don't have the capacity to examine their lives in a really intentional way. And it's like, you don't even fully know why you acting like that. And I feel bad that you don't get to understand and know yourself.
That I think is what it is that they don't understand that they're acting like why they are showing up in that way. And that that to me is, I don't want to say it's sad. Again, I'm not sitting here harboring empathy for white supremacists, but I do think that dynamic is at the crux of the issues we see in our society. And a lot of what you and I are contending with, because I think you and I are finding those folks who have started to examine their own shit. They are starting to see, and like the veil is starting to be pulled back. They're starting to see things for what they really are, but they need a little bit of guidance of where do they go now that they've found themselves there. Whereas like the people
process that, how to process that information, right? Because like we get this information and then you're kind of like, I don't know what to do with this now. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Not even just what my next step is, where to go. I don't know what to do right now with this. Like, I think you have too. We've had people be like, I don't know how to like enter into conversation with anybody anymore. Now that like I realize this, I'm having a hard time getting up in the morning now that I realize this. And it's like, okay, you actually need like, here are some questions for you to think through. People need that. I mean, I know we need it. I still need it in my own life, right? Yeah. And I think that is, so people need that. And when we don't have it, what happens is what we see is that folks just aren't able to deal. So then those of us who have been exposed to, this is the reality of the situation for a lot of people who look like me, who don't look like me, but a lot of people. And now I feel paralyzed, but now you have somebody helping guide you through it. Or you get that realization and you feel paralyzed and you're like, it's too hard. So now I'm just not going to do it. Yeah. And I think for you and I, we're like, nope, we will help. We're going to help you because we can't have you not doing it.
Right. Well, and also I think, one of the things we did with our most recent like community of practice that we led is that we ended on embodiment practices because again, we've divorced ourselves so much from our own feelings because that's what, that's what oppression asks of us. That's what capitalism asks of us is to, just go. Like you're not being, you're doing, you're like, you might have racing thoughts. You're not settling in and like thinking about these things. And so we were helping folks to really start to center themselves so that they could create their own, like the spaciousness within their own minds.
That's right.
To be able to engage with these things.
That's right. The grounding of understanding who you are. Ground yourself in what you know to be real and true and what you hold as values.
Yeah.
And then kind of move through it. No, it's true. So here's the thing, y'all. Erin and I gave ourselves some time. I'm holding us to this time. And we like scratched the surface of what we wanted to talk about. But Erin and I also hold that like we're going to talk about whatever we're going to talk about. And that's what we were supposed to talk about.
Yeah.
So I am just naming that for us, Erin, that we have been talking for like 30 minutes and we want to make sure that we are not taking up all of y'all's time because we want y'all to hear everything that we're saying and to continue to engage with us. Because I need y'all to keep listening to Rise and Rouse. This is me amping it up. I'm the hype lady right now. Y'all got to keep listening to it because Erin's talking to really cool people, really cool community leaders. We're talking about understanding intimacy and sex in a liberated society. We're talking about community building in a liberated society. We're talking about relationship to work in a liberated society. Y'all got to keep listening to this stuff. But in order to keep your attention, we know that we can't be on here talking for 3 hours. So, Erin, how you want to wrap?
Yeah, I want to wrap this up. I know. I'm like, what? I'll wrap it up. I'm going to keep chatting. But I do want to say, like, I think the last thing I'll say is just that, as you're kind of coming to the end of this conversation, like, think about where it is that you need to slow down and really give yourself some space to engage with these topics, especially because this is coming out on Juneteenth. My hope is that when you listen to this, that you give yourself some space to like slow down, think about things, look at some of the resources that we'll put into the show notes, but give yourself a chance to really interrogate like what it means to show up fully in the face of oppression and how your liberation, your personal liberation is tied to other people's liberation, and how you can be an active participant in making that happen in whatever unique way whatever it looks like for you, because it's going to look different for everybody.
And please attend to your anti-Blackness that all of us are holding. Attend to your anti-Blackness and attend to the heteronormativity that you're holding. Because again, Juneteenth and Pride Month. So we're going to attend to both of those things all the time, but especially right now, just make sure that you are thinking about the ways that you hold on to anti-Black sentiment and how that can show up with everybody around you, even when you don't think that that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right. I was thinking about when you were saying not talking over people. I was like, oh my God, I do all the time. And then I was like, but that's like cultural nuance. No, but I do. Right. But that's like cultural nuance. I had this conversation with a really good friend of mine, Tina, because she was going through something. So we were on the phone and I was upset on her behalf that she was going through it. Tina's not a Black woman. And so I'm upset on her behalf. And so what that means is I'm like cussing and fussing about it. And for her, it felt like I'm cussing and fussing at her.
Yeah.
But what I'm actually doing is cussing and fussing to her about this whole situation. And she had to stop me and say, Emerald, please stop fussing at me. And then she says, I know it's cultural. I do know. And also, I just want you to be really nice and soft with me right now. And like, I took that feedback, right? But like acknowledging that, like, I bring that up as an example of anti-Blackness. Sometimes it's cultural. I talk loud, I gesticulate, I might cut you off, but I'm not doing that to assert dominance. That is a cultural thing of like engagement, right? So it becomes like these nuanced things, even when you think it is innocuous. Understand how sentiments like that could be anti-Black, could be heteronormative in a lot of ways, right? There's these cultural nuances. Like really examine that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know you and I have talked about it before where somebody's like, well, they were all just so loud. And I'm like, what the fuck?
And I'll be the first one to say, I know I'm loud as a Black person. I know that I feed the stereotype, but I also know a whole lot of other people who are not Black who laugh.
Oh, but also just like, why are you judging people? Because I don't know. It was just like, what a weird
thing to say,
like without any like consciousness around what that person was saying at that moment in time. So anyways, I just think it's, I don't know, so many interesting things. There was more to that story, but you let me be loud too sometimes. There's still times where I'm loud.
And a lot more than I think you realize. And I don't to let you, I just welcome you. I'm like, you show up however you're going to show up, and I'm going to embrace it, right? And I think that you do the same thing for me. And sometimes that means that we're talking about something and our ideas on it, or they could not be more different. And I think we just work through it every single time it has happened.
Yep.
Every time it has happened, Aaron, we sit and we work through it. And that's it. Like, I think one of the things that I love about this, I think one of the things that people love about us in this is that we are not hiding who we are as individual
not
people
at all.
From each other or from the world. And it looks strange, I think, from the outside. And I'm just like, no, but this is community. We are not all the same people. We are all such very different people from one another. And you find a way to do it together. You find a way to sit in the conversations. You find a way to hold what you need, to hold what the other people need, and to hold those things together. One does not supersede the other, right? I think that like that is the work ultimately. And I think about like the larger political realm. It's not about saying, Black people want more rights, or queer people want more rights than non-Black people or straight folks or whatever, right? It's about saying, how do you get your needs met? How can I get my needs met? The two don't have to meet, but we have to be able to hold both true without harming one another. Because I don't want you to have less, and I also don't want to have less. So how do we both have exactly what we need? We got to be able to sit in conversation and figure that out. Unless what you need is for me not to exist, then that's a whole different course of action.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it when you show up and you're silly and you're loud, because I also know that you don't get to do that everywhere.
This is true. Yeah. The whimsy is the part. I'm so grateful that you welcomed the whimsy, even though at first you were like, what the fuck?
What are you doing? But now it's like silly.
Yeah.
Like I'm an
Yeah.
extremely silly person. I am not a serious. I don't take anything seriously. What I said. I take my work seriously. I take building community very seriously.
Yeah.
I don't take anything about myself seriously at all. You know. But the work, community building, the work of liberation that we're doing together, the work of getting us all free, the work of abolition. I take that shit so seriously. I just don't take myself seriously. And that means that I have to allow that for everybody else. I have to trust that you take that work seriously, but why should you take yourself overly seriously? And why should I project onto you that you should have to do that in my presence? Because I damn sure don't do it for myself.
I know. And I think, there is a tension though, I think too, because like there are times where I am so serious, and you're just like, okay, you need to like chill out a little there. And so to me, it was like such a beautiful thing as I started to show up with more whimsy in the space with you too, because like not a lot of people see that. And actually, really and truly, like my partner and I, that was probably the first time meeting my partner and just kind of being in this relationship was the first time I felt like I could tap back into that kind of like, childlike whimsy, play, joy. And it really is testament to my partner who drew that out of me in the first place. But then now that that's there, it's like just everywhere. And my mother has noticed it too. I went from just being this kind of a little bit of a sourpuss, I will say, probably because I was in a shitty marriage before. And
but there are other
really,
things I feel like
really unhappy. Yeah. Yep. And then now it's like my mom sees me with my partner and she's just like, oh, there's like a softness. There's like a joyfulness, a playfulness that didn't exist before because I was battling other demons at that point in time.
I'm so happy that you have that with him.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that he has that with you. I'm so happy that you have that with me. And I'm so happy that I have that with you. I'm happy that you are building, I am building relationships with people where we can show up in the fullness of our authenticity, in the fullness of our humanity, messy, crying, laughing. Like we can do like all of that and we get to embody all of that. And I think that that's ultimately what we want for everybody. So that's actually it.
Yeah, exactly. To be able to be free. Really,
to be free in it all. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, y'all. Steve, I was ending it.
Totally. I know. I'm sorry. It's so hard to like stop talking because it's like we love being because people get to see like that we love doing this together. We like being in space together.
Through these things with one another. We like the perspective building and we want others to have that joy in it. Conversations about identity are so hard. And Aaron and I always try to focus on joy because while the conversations themselves can be challenging, they're personal, they're intimate, there is joy. There is so much joy. And I would argue some of the truest forms of joy are found in connecting with another human authentically. And so even though the conversations are hard and they feel challenging, we always try to say, but how much joy is it getting through that conversation and having a deeper connection with somebody else, showing up authentically, allowing them to show up in that way, to build something that we are not encouraged to build in society. There's so much joy found in that. So if we can just get through that tension, how many contentious conversations, seriously, have you and I had in the last 2 weeks?
I know.
About faith?
Yeah. I wouldn't say contentious. I think they were tense.
They were tense.
But we weren't fighting or anything like that. You and I both continued to kind of like orient around the fact that we need to figure this out and we need to get on the same page with one another. It was iterative because we didn't get there right away in the first, couple of conversations. So it was like we built on each of them. We gave each other homework and then arrived at the place that we were always going to arrive at, you know what I mean? But the journey was the important part. And now with all of that, you and I have that now, that foundation of all of that work we did that we will continue to bring as we move forward too. And it's like, God, I wish that upon everyone is that they have space to like wrestle iteratively. And because we have cultivated that safety between the two of us, like we can do it. Anyways, we could keep going. My
favorite things to say, and give me and Aaron at the end of any meeting, doesn't matter what we're talking about, whether it is a tense conversation or not so much, whether we're designing something for the lab or we're just catching up. I think I always in the conversations is, well, Aaron, we just have to keep talking about it.
We sure will. Yeah.
We just have to keep doing what we're doing. We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep showing up to the table with one another.
Yep. And even when it's hard. And there are times
when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.
That's right.
So yeah, people will be able to continue to hear us. People can find us all over the place, right?
Oh, man, everywhere.
Everywhere is what it feels like. So Substack, find Emerald and I both on Substack. We both have our own channels, and we'll be posting this on both channels, Rise and Rouse, Emerald's Substack, and then we've got the liberationnexuslab.com is our website. Go sign up for the newsletter because we'll be talking about all the cool things we have coming up and offerings that we have. So that's the best way to stay in touch with the lab. And then follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm sure there's other places, but like just go find us out in the world, out in the wild, and just know that we're still in the building phase of things. So things might look a little sparse right now, but they won't for long.
That's right.